The dim hum of the colony ship's engines vibrated through the bulkheads like a distant heartbeat, a rhythm that had lulled Captain Ilara Voss into complacency during the long haul from Seoul. She stood at the observation deck's viewport, her calloused hands gripping the railing, eyes fixed on the swirling nebula ahead, a vast iridescent storm that painted the void in hues of electric blue and bruised purple. At 42, Ilara was the steady hand of the mission, her gray-streaked hair tied back in a practical knot, her face etched with the quiet resolve of someone who'd bartered her youth for stars. The ship, Endeavour, carried 200 souls bound for Epsilon Eridani, humanity's boldest leap yet, a self-sustaining ark fleeing Earth's overtaxed cradle. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, peering at a holographic display flickering with sensor data. Kai was the thinker, wiry and precise, his optimism a spark that often clashed with Ilara's pragmatism. "The readings are stabilizing," he said, his voice carrying that faint lilt from his Shanghai upbringing. "Radiation levels within tolerances. We should break through the nebula in 12 hours, clean and clear." Ilara nodded, but her gaze lingered on the chaos outside. The nebula wasn't just gas and dust. It was a graveyard of ancient stellar remnants, whispers of supernovae long faded. She'd read the briefings, uncharted but navigable. Still, something tugged at her gut, a sailor's instinct honed on oceanic freighters before she traded waves for warp drives. "Keep the shields at full," she replied, turning away. "And alert engineering. I want double checks on the core." Down in the hydroponics bay, amid the earthy scent of soil and sprouting greens, Lieutenant Mira Torres wiped sweat from her brow. At 28, she was the crew's firebrand, brash, quick with a laugh or a curse, her tattooed arms a map of forgotten ports from Luna to Mars. She coaxed a stubborn vine back onto its trellis, muttering encouragements in Spanish. The bay was her domain, a green lung for the ship, vital for the colony's future. But today the plant seemed restless, leaves curling as if sensing the nebula's approach. A comm pinged in her ear. "Torres, report," came Ilara's voice, crisp over the line. "All good, Cap. Veggies are thriving, got enough kale to choke a fusion reactor." Mira grinned, though no one could see it. She straightened, glancing at the bulkhead monitors. Air recyclers hummed steadily, but a faint anomaly blinked. Minor power fluctuations. Nothing critical, but enough to make her pause. "Hey, you seeing these dips in the grid? Like the ship's got the hiccups." "Logged it," Ilara said. "Ren's on it. Stay sharp." Mira unhooked her toolkit, deciding to trace the lines herself. The Endeavour was tough, built on human grit and recycled dreams, but out here glitches could snowball. She followed the conduit access panel, her boots clanging softly on the grated floor. The ship felt alive under her feet, a beast pushing through the dark. In the command bridge, Ilara settled into her chair, the leather creaking under her. Kai slid into the adjacent station, pulling up NAV charts. The crew was small, essential only, handpicked for this exodus. No room for dead weight. "Eridani's waiting," Kai murmured, more to himself. "Fresh worlds, no politics, just us and the soil." Ilara allowed a small smile. "And the bugs, probably." But her mind was on the nebula. As the ship inched closer, the viewport's glow intensified, bathing the bridge in ethereal light. Alarms remained silent, yet the air thickened with unspoken tension. Then, without warning, the deck shuddered. A low groan echoed through the hull, like metal protesting under strain. Lights flickered, and Kai's display glitched, symbols dissolving into static. Ilara's hand shot to the comm, "Engineering. Status." Myra's voice crackled back, strained. "Cap, we've got a surge. Nebula's interfering with the magnetic fields. Course spiking." Ilara's jaw tightened. The plan had been simple: skirt the edge, ride the currents. But the nebula had other ideas, its tendrils reaching out like invisible claws. Shields held for now, but the ship listed slightly, caught in an unseen pull. Kai's fingers flew over controls, rerouting power, sweat beading on his forehead. "Compensating, it's fighting us." "Divert auxiliary to stabilizers," Ilara ordered, her voice steady as steel. She could feel the stakes sharpening, the colony's dreams, fragile as seedlings, now teetering on this cosmic whim. Outside, the nebula churned, indifferent to the humans who dared its path. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the worn leather creaking under her calloused fingers. The bridge of the Odyssey hummed with the low thrum of failing life support systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Jax, her wiry engineer, hunched over a flickering console, sweat beading on his forehead as he rerouted power from non-essentials. "It's holding barely," he muttered, his voice tight with the strain of a man who jury-rigged half the ship's guts with nothing but spite and duct tape. Beside him, Dr. Lena Reyes scanned the sensor readouts, her dark eyes narrowing at the anomaly blooming on the view screen. A swirling vortex of plasma and debris, the remnants of what the alien signals had called a gateway. It wasn't a door to paradise, it was a graveyard for the unwary. The plan had been simple. Skim the edge, gather data on the energy signatures that had drawn the Galactic Concorde's envoys here like moths to a flame. Humanity's first deep space outreach, a desperate bid to prove they belonged among the stars after decades of isolation. But the vortex had other ideas. A sudden gravitational shear had yanked the Odyssey off course, shearing away the auxiliary thrusters in a burst of fire and silence. Alarms wailed as hull integrity dropped to 80%, the ship groaning like a wounded beast. "Status on the core?" Alara asked, her tone steady, the kind of calm forged in asteroid mining ops where one wrong call meant a coffin in the void. Jax slammed a fist against the panel, sparks flying. "Overloaded. If we push the engines now, we risk a cascade failure. We're drifting straight into the hot zone." He glanced up, his usual smirk absent, replaced by the raw edge of fear he rarely let show. Lena stepped forward, her tablet clutched like a shield. "The Concorde's beacon is still active, but it's faint. They must be on the other side, or what's left of them. We can't just wait, radiation levels are spiking." Alara nodded, her mind racing through options. The crew was down to essentials. Her, Jax, Lena, and Tomas in the med bay, nursing a fractured arm from the initial jolt. No heroes here, just survivors who'd clawed their way from Earth's crumbling colonies. "Helm, plot a manual burn using the maneuvering jets. Get us to the fringe." The pilot's hands flew across the controls, but the ship shuddered violently, a metallic screech echoing through the decks as another panel buckled. It was then that the comms crackled to life, not the clean signal of the Concorde but a garbled burst in fragmented English, overlaid with what sounded like alien harmonics. "Human vessel, do not," the silence, it listens. The transmission cut out, leaving only static. Alara's jaw tightened. Whatever the stars were remembering, it wasn't going to be their epitaph. "Jax, isolate that signal." Lena, cross-reference with the Xenolinguistics database. "We're not drifting blind." As the vortex loomed larger on the screen, its tendrils of ionized gas reaching out like spectral fingers, the first plan began to fray. The jets fired in fits and starts, buying them seconds, but the ship's momentum betrayed them, pulling them inexorably closer. Jax cursed under his breath, splicing wires with bare hands, while Lena whispered calculations to herself, her caution warring with the urgency in her voice. Alara stood, the weight of command settling heavier than the artificial gravity. They had to adapt or the silence would claim them all. The hum of the engines vibrated through the deck plates like a distant heartbeat, steady but insistent. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as she stared out at the void. The fleet's silhouette dotted the stars ahead, hundreds of ships, human-made arcs carrying the remnants of their worlds. Behind them, the galactic core loomed, a swirling maelstrom of light that had once promised alliance but now whispered threats. The Kalar blockade was closing in. Their sensor ghosts flickered on the tactical display, probing for weaknesses. Marcus wiped grease from his hands on his jumpsuit, his face smudged with the residue of hasty repairs. "The warp coils are holding, Captain, but barely. That last jump fried half the stabilizers. If we push for the outer rim without a full recalibration, we risk shearing the hull." His voice carried the weight of exhaustion, but his eyes, sharp, unyielding, betrayed the engineer's grit that had kept them flying this far. Lila paced behind them, her tablet clutched like a shield. The diplomat's usual poise had cracked. Strands of her dark hair escaped her bun, framing a face etched with doubt. "The Kalar aren't bluffing this time. Their last transmission demanded we turn back or face," containment. If we scatter the fleet now, we lose cohesion. Families will be separated, whole colonies adrift. Elena turned, her breath fogging the viewport briefly. Brave didn't mean fearless. It meant choosing the hard path when softer ones beckoned. We don't turn back. Not after what they did to Epsilon Station. She glanced at Marcus. How long until the coils are stable? He shrugged, already mentally mapping the engine room's chaos. 2 hours if I cannibalize the auxiliary drives. But it'll slow us, make us sitting ducks. The alert klaxon blared then, red lights pulsing across the bridge feed. A Kalar interceptor had breached the outer picket line, its sleek form slicing through the black like a predator's fin. Elena's hand flew to the comms. All hands, battle stations. Helm, evasive pattern Delta. Marcus, get those repairs done yesterday. As the ship lurched into motion, Lila stopped pacing, her voice steadying. I can try hailing them again by time. Remind them we're not a threat, just survivors. Elena nodded, but her jaw tightened. Do it. But if they fire first. She let the words hang, the unspoken cost settling over them like dust from a fallen world. In the engine room below, Marcus dove into the access panels, sparks flying as he rerouted power. The heat pressed in, a forge testing his resolve. He'd built these ships from scrap on Mars colonies, back when humanity dreamed of stars without chains. No Kalar weapon would claim them now, not on his watch. Tools clattered. His hands moved with the precision of someone who'd stared down worse than failing tech. Up on the deck, the interceptor closed, its weapons array glowing. Lila's voice echoed over the open channel, calm amid the storm. This is the human vessel Odyssey. We seek only passage. Stand down, there's no need for. A warning shot lanced past, close enough to rattle the hull. Elena's fingers danced over the controls, firing countermeasures that bloomed like fleeting flowers in the void. The fleet's response came in scattered bursts. Civilian ships weren't built for war, but desperation forged weapons from anything. The interceptor veered, buying them seconds. Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom. Coils at 60%. We can jump in one, but it'll tear us apart if we're not aligned. Elena calculated, heart pounding. Scatter and risk the weak, or bunch up and invite annihilation. Fleet command, form up on Odyssey. Tight formation. We're punching through together. Lila ended her hail, eyes meeting Elena's. They didn't respond. Whatever we do, it's on us now. The stars blurred as the engines whined, the gamble hanging in the balance. One wrong vector, and the silence of space would claim them all. But in that moment, amid the roar, Elena felt the pull of something deeper, humanity's quiet defiance, walking out not in rage but in unbreakable resolve. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the ship shuddered again. The void outside stretched like an endless black canvas, stars pinpricks of indifference against the hull's faint vibrations. Marcus was already at the console, his fingers dancing over the flickering holograph, muttering under his breath. Come on, you stubborn beast. Don't make me beg. Lila hovered nearby, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes scanning readouts that painted a grim picture. The antimatter core was fluctuating, wild spikes that could tear the drive apart if they didn't stabilize it soon. They'd left Sol 3 weeks ago, the silence of departure still echoing in their bones, but this glitch felt personal, like the universe testing their resolve. It's the containment field, she said, voice steady despite the crease between her brows. The flare we skimmed back in the belt must have ionized something. We lose it and we're coasting debris. Elena nodded, forcing her gaze from the stars. Brave didn't mean fearless, it meant pushing through the knot in her gut. Options? We can't afford drift, not with the relay nodes ahead. The nodes were their lifeline, ancient Xeno relics that could boost their signal home, if the stories from the probes held true. But reaching them meant threading this needle of failing tech. Marcus leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. His wit usually cut tension like a laser, but now it simmered beneath the surface. Plan A, reroute auxiliary power to the stabilizers. Risky, might brown out life support for a bit. Plan B, manual purge of the core. That means suiting up, cracking the casing while it's hot. Fun times. He flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes, but It pulled Elena back from the edge. She waited, the ship groaning like an old friend in pain. The crew below, 200 souls handpicked for this exodus, depended on her call. No dramatics, just the raw math of survival. Plan a first. Lila, monitor the fields. Marcus, make it sing. If it fails, we go manual. No heroes, just results. They moved as one, a quiet rhythm born of drills and desperation. Lila's cautious tweaks fed data to Marcus, who coaxed the systems with a mechanic's intuition. The deck lights dimmed, air recyclers whining as power shifted. Elena stood watch, her mind flashing to the launch. Earth shrinking to a blue marble, the silence of billions waving goodbye. No fanfare, just humanity slipping away, betting on the stars. A sharp alarm pierced the hum, containment at 80%. Marcus cursed, slamming a fist on the console. It's bucking. The reroute's not holding, feedback loops building. Sparks danced from a panel, acrid smoke curling up. Lila's face paled, but her voice cut clear. 82, 85. We have minutes. Elena's decision crystallized. Suit up. Both of you. I'll coordinate from here. No argument, they knew the stakes. The manual purge was their ace, a human hack against alien-engineered guts. Marcus pulled on his rig with practiced ease, helmet under arm. If I don't make it back, tell the stars I said hello. And keep my coffee ration. Lila shot him a look, half exasperated, half grateful. Focus. The purge valves at Sector 7. Align the fields remotely or advance everything. They sealed the airlock, vanishing into the bowels where the core pulsed like a wounded heart. Elena patched through, her voice a lifeline in the static. Visuals up. Cores nominal at the casing, go slow. The feed showed them floating in 0G, tools glinting under emergency strips. Marcus reached the valve first, his gloved hand steady as he initiated the sequence. But the ship lurched, a deep tremor rattling the deck. Alarms wailed, breach imminent. Pressures spiking. Lila's warning crackled over comms. She was overriding safeties from a subpanel, her caution turning to fierce precision. Marcus twisted the valve, sweat beating inside his visor. Got it, purging now. Hold on to your stars. The shutter peaked, then eased, the core's fury bleeding out into the void. Elena exhaled, watching the readouts green. But as the all-clear chimed, a new alert blinked. Auxiliary tanks compromised. Fuel efficiency down 15%. They'd make the nodes, but slower, more time in the black, more strain on rations, on nerves. Marcus and Lila emerged, helmets off, faces streaked with grime. He clapped Elena's shoulder. Teamwork makes the dream work. What's next, Cap? She met their eyes, the weight settling but not crushing. We adapt. Always. The stars outside held their vigil, remembering the quiet walkers who dared the silence. Elena gripped the console edge as the Endeavor's hull groaned under another plasma surge. The nebulous tendrils clawed at their shields, painting the viewport in sickly violet streaks. Marco wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over the jury-rigged panel. Shields at 20%, Cap. If we push the engines harder, we might punch through to clear space, but it'll fry the auxiliary systems. No life support buffer. She nodded, jaw set. Lila hovered behind them, her tablet flickering with erratic readings. The scientist's eyes darted between the screens, cautious as ever. The storm's patterns are shifting. It's not random, there's a resonance frequency building. We override it wrong and we're vapor. The ship lurched, emergency lights bathing the bridge in red. Elena's mind raced back to the Council's final transmission. Humanity's quiet exodus from the Alliance. No fanfare, just a collective step back after centuries of meddling. They'd left the stars to sort their own messes, but now this nebula, a relic of some ancient war, trapped their lone scout vessel. No backup. No glory. Just survival. Marco reroute power from non-essentials. Weapons, sensors, everything but the core drive. Elena's voice cut sharp through the hum of straining circuits. He hesitated, wit flashing in his grin despite the strain. Non-essentials? Cap, that's my coffee maker you're killing. Lila shot him a glare. Focus. If we harmonize the deflector with that frequency, we could ride the wave out instead of fighting it. Her words tumbled out, precise but edged with doubt. Elena waited. Lila's caution had saved them before, but time was bleeding away. Alarms blared as a surge hit, buckling a bulkhead somewhere below. Sparks flew from the console. Marco cursed, slamming a fist to reset the board. Too late, deflectors offline. We're blind in here. Elena straightened, the weight of command settling like nebula fog. They weren't turning back. Humanity's walkout had been silent, but their grit echoed. Then we adapt. Lila, talk me through the manual sync. Marco, get us manual thrusters online. We dance with this storm or become its dust. The ship shuddered again, but their hands moved in sync, Elena's steady orders weaving Marco's quick fixes with Lila's calculated tweaks. For a moment, the violet haze outside seemed to pulse in rhythm, as if the stars themselves were watching, remembering. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, each pulse of exotic particles sending tremors through the deck. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, his usual smirk replaced by a grim line. That jury-rigged shield's holding, for now. But if we don't vent the excess charge soon, it'll fry the core. Lila hunched over her scanner, her fingers flying across the holographic display. Caution had kept her alive through a dozen expeditions, but doubt gnawed at her now. The readings spiked erratically, painting the chamber in flickering reds and blues. The anomaly's shifting. It's not random, it's adapting. Like it's learning our defenses. She glanced at Elena, eyes wide behind her visor. We can't just push through. One wrong maneuver and we're ionized dust. Elena straightened, forcing steel into her voice. The crew of 3 had faced worse, pirate ambushes, hull breaches and asteroid fields. But this nebula felt alive, a cosmic predator toying with its prey. Resource shortages bit deepest. Oxygen recyclers strained at 87%, power reserves dipping below critical. They needed a way out or the stars would claim another human vessel. Marcus, talk to me. What's our play? He leaned back, cracking his neck with a pop that echoed in the tight bridge. Wood had always been his shield, but humor felt thin here. Plan A, reroute auxiliary power to the emitters, create a feedback loop to repel the particles. Risky, but it might buy us a clear vector. His eyes flicked to the viewport, where the nebula swirled like smoke from a dying fire, one vivid streak of violet cutting through the haze like a scar. Lila shook her head, her voice tight. And if it backfires? We've got no margin for error. The core's already overheating, push it and we lose everything. She tapped the scanner, pulling up a simulation that bloomed into a web of probable outcomes, most branching into failure. Elena weighed their words, the hum of failing systems underscoring the silence. Earnest resolve burned in her chest. Humanity hadn't clawed its way to the stars by folding at the first sign of teeth. We adapt. Marcus, prep the reroute. Lila, monitor the anomaly, find its weak point. We're not drifting forever. She punched coordinates into the NAV console, her hand steady despite the quake in her gut. Marcus nodded, sliding into the engineering panel with practiced ease. Sparks danced from the exposed wiring as he worked, the acrid scent of ozone sharpening the air. On it, Cap. Just don't ask me to make it pretty. He isolated the power lines, fingers deft amid the chaos, but a sudden jolt rocked the ship. Alarms wailed louder, lights dimming to emergency red. Lila's scanner chimed, a warning. It's reacting. The anomaly's coalescing around the emitters. Her cautious nature screamed retreat, but she traced the pattern, spotting a fleeting gap in the particle storm, a breath of calm amid the fury. Elena seized the moment. Now Marcus, fire it. He slammed the override and energy surged through the lines. The ship groaned, hull vibrating as the feedback loop ignited. For a heartbeat, the nebula recoiled, its violet tendrils peeling back like burned flesh. They punched forward, engines roaring against the drag. But victory soured fast. A secondary surge hit, the core's temperature spiking into the danger zone. Marcus cursed, yanking levers. It's overloading. We bought time, but the damage is spreading, life support's next. Smoke curled from vents, the bridge filling with haze that stung their eyes. Lila cross-checked her data, voice urgent. There's a stable pocket, 2 clicks starboard. If we can limp there. Elena adjusted course, the ship listing under the strain. Camaraderie held them together, grit in Marcus's quick fixes, Lila's sharp insights, Elena's unyielding push. Yet the cost mounted. A flickering console warned of breached seals, air hissing faintly somewhere below. As they veered toward the pocket, the nebula lashed out one final time, a lance of plasma grazing the shields. Elena braced, heart pounding. The stars beyond waited, indifferent witnesses to their gamble. They weren't out yet, but in that fragile gap, hope flickered like a distant sun. Elena gripped the edge of the control console, her knuckles whitening against the scarred metal. The ship's hum had turned erratic, like a heartbeat skipping under strain, and the viewscreen flickered with static-laced images of the nebula's swirling gases. Outside, the alien vessel loomed closer, its sleek hull cutting through the void like a predator's fin. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a jury-rigged panel of exposed wires and salvaged circuits. "We reroute the auxiliary power through the graph plating," he muttered, voice steady despite the chaos. "It'll give us a burst, enough to slingshot past their blockade. But if the plating overloads..." Lila shot him a sharp look from her station, her cautious eyes narrowing behind smudged lenses. "And if it doesn't? That ship's not here for tea. They've been shadowing us since the relay station blew." She tapped her scanner, the readout pulsing with hostile signatures. Energy signatures that matched the reports from the outer colonies, the ones humans had whispered about in the dim bars of Epsilon Station. Jax, strapped into the pilot's chair, cracked his neck with a grim smile. "Then we make him regret the chase. Elena, your call." The captain nodded, her brave resolve a quiet fire in the dim cabin light. The plan was desperate, born from scraps. No reinforcements, fuel reserves dipping into the red, and the nebula's interference jamming their distress beacon. They'd come out here to map uncharted routes, prove humanity's worth beyond the core worlds, but now survival trumped discovery. "Do it, Marcus." Jax, plot the vector. Lila, keep eyes on their weapons array. Marcus flipped the switch and the ship shuddered. Alarms blared as power surged through unfamiliar paths, the deck vibrating under their feet. For a moment, it worked. The engines roared, propelling them toward the nebula's dense heart, where the alien ship hesitated, its senso-aris likely baffled by the human improvisation. But then the backfire hit. A sharp crack echoed from below decks, followed by the acrid scent of burning insulation. "Overload!" Marcus yelled, slamming panels shut. Sparks flew, and the lights dimmed to emergency red. Lila's scanner beeped urgently. "They're locking weapons. We've got seconds." Elena unstrapped, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. "Marcus, contain it." Jax, evasive, now. She dashed toward the engineering access, the ship's groan masking her pounding heart. The cost was already clear. One more failure, and they'd lose the graph plating entirely, leaving them adrift in the nebula's toxic embrace. Jax wrenched the controls, the ship banking hard into a spiral. G-forces pinned them, but he held the course, his grit forged in 100 smuggling runs before this expedition. Eating their dust, barely. Through the flickering view screen, the alien craft fired, a lance of plasma that grazed their shields, sending ripples across the hull. Elena reached the breach, foam hissing against the flames licking the conduits. Her mind raced, adapt or die. If they couldn't outrun, maybe they could outthink. "Captain," Lila's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with tension. "Their comms are opening a channel. They're hailing, demanding surrender." Elena's jaw tightened as she sealed the hatch, the fire subdued but the damage lingering like a scar. Surrender meant dissection, the stars knew. Humans were curiosities to these xenohunters, not equals. "Patch it through, but keep scanning for weaknesses. We're not done yet." The hail buzzed in, a synthetic voice warping through translators. "Primitive vessel, power down. Your ingenuity ends here." Marcus chuckled darkly from the bridge, patching himself back in. "Ingenuity? That's our middle name." But his wit masked the fear. The ship's vitals were crashing, resources stretched to breaking. As the alien ship closed in, Elena climbed back, her uniform singed. The nebula's glow bathed the cabin in ethereal purple, a stark reminder of the vast indifference outside. They'd bought time, but the stakes had risen. Now it was personal, a test of human will against the cold logic of the stars. Jax adjusted course, weaving through gas clouds, while Lila pinpointed a faint anomaly in the alien's drive signature. A flaw perhaps. A chance. Elena met their eyes, the team's camaraderie a silent vow. We adapt. Together. The ship dove deeper, the pursuit hot on their tail, the silence of space broken only by the strain of their defiance. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that the Endeavor was running on borrowed time. Alex wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers leaving a streak of grease across his forehead as he sealed the last panel on the makeshift fusion regulator. The air recyclers wheezed, pulling in the metallic tang of overheated circuits, and he glanced at the readouts flickering on his wrist terminal. Stable for now. But the void outside pressed in, the stars a cold audience to their desperation. Lena crouched beside him in the engineering bay, her tools scattered like fallen stars across the floor. She adjusted her visor, the holographic display casting blue ghosts across her sharp features. You're pushing her too hard, Alex. The core's holding, but if we spike another surge like last cycle, it'll fry the relays. We lose those, and it's not just power, it's life support. He straightened, rolling his shoulders against the ache. Brave as he was, the weight of command had carved lines into his face that weren't there a year ago. We don't have a choice. The swarm's closing in, scans show their vanguard probes within sensor range. If we don't jump to the relay point, they'll pick us apart. His voice carried the grit of someone who jury-rigged half the ship from scrap, but doubt flickered in his eyes. The Kroth swarm wasn't some mindless horde. They adapted, learned from every skirmish. Humanity's silence in retreat had bought them distance, but not safety. From the corridor, footsteps echoed, quick, uneven. Kai burst through the hatch, his pilot's jacket torn at the sleeve, blood seeping from a gash on his arm. The young navigator, ever the cautious one, clutched a data slate like a shield. Captain's calling everyone to the bridge. It's bad. The relay beacons glitching, interference from the nebula's radiation. We plot the jump wrong and we end up scattered across light years. Alex exchanged a look with Lena, her wit surfacing in a wry twist of her lips despite the tension. Or we don't jump at all and the Kroth turn us into cosmic dust. Great options. She stood, pocketing her multi-tool with a snap. Let's see what miracles the captain's got up her sleeve this time. The bridge was a hive of controlled chaos, consoles blinking erratically under the strain. Captain Reyes stood at the central holodable, her posture unyielding, dark hair pulled back in a severe knot. She'd led them through the exodus from Sol's ruins, her decisions forged in the fire of humanity's quiet departure. No fanfare, just the grim resolve to survive. Now her fingers traced the projected swarm vectors, red tendrils snaking toward their position like veins of malice. Status? She asked as they filed in, her voice steady, anchoring them. Alex reported first, the words clipped. Regulators online. We can sustain thrust for another 12 hours, maybe 15 if we ration the coolant. Lena added, but the nebula's messing with our NAV systems. Kai's right, beacon's unreliable. One wrong vector and we're ghosts. Reyes nodded, her gaze sweeping the group. Kai shifted, his caution making him speak softly. I reran the calcs 3 times. Best I can do is a 70% alignment. That's not enough. Silence hung, thick as the radiation haze outside. The stars through the viewport seemed to hold their breath, remembering the day humanity had walked away from everything, ships slipping into the black without a word. It was that silence that had kept them alive so far. No signals for the Kroth to trace, no boasts to invite pursuit. But silence couldn't outrun physics. Then we adapt, Reyes said finally, her tone earnest, pulling them into the moment. Lena, can you boost the sensor array? Jury-rig a filter for the interference. Lena's eyes lit up, the challenge igniting her ingenuity. With what? We're down to scraps. Use the auxiliary array from the probe launcher. Strip it, cross-wire it to the main dish. It'll give us a clearer ping on the beacon. Alex leaned in, already visualizing the connections. Risky. If it overloads, it won't, Kai interjected, surprising them with a spark of resolve. His hands steadied on the console. I'll plot a microjump first, test the alignment on a short vector. Buy us time to fine-tune. Reyes met each gaze, the camaraderie unspoken but palpable, the grit that had carried humanity this far. Make it happen. We jump in 6 hours or we don't jump at all. As they scattered to tasks, the ship groaned under a distant tremor, the swarm's outer edge brushing their shields like probing fingers. Alex paused at the hatch, glancing back at the holodable where the red lines crept closer. The cost was mounting, fuel cells depleting, crew fatigue etching deeper. One mistake and their silence would be eternal. In the dim glow of the sensor bay, Lena worked with feverish precision, sparks flying as she fused circuits. Alex handed her a conduit, their hands brushing, a brief anchor amid the storm. We've beaten worse odds, he murmured. She smirked, wiping grime from her cheek. Yeah, but the stars? They're watching. Better not disappoint them. The first test ping echoed through the comms, a fragile lifeline cutting through the nebula's veil. Kai's voice crackled from the bridge, alignment at 85%. Holding. But as the second surge built, a warning klaxon blared, shield integrity dropping. The Croth had found them faster than expected. Rhea's order cut through, evasive pattern delta. Buy us time. The dim glow of the emergency lights cast long shadows across the bridge of the Endurance, turning the once bustling command center into a tomb of flickering consoles and silent alarms. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from fear but from the stifling heat that had built up since the life support systems began their slow betrayal 2 hours ago. Around her, the air hummed with the labored breathing of her crew. Marcus, the chief engineer, hunched over a jury-rigged panel, his fingers dancing across exposed wiring like a pianist in a storm, and Lila, the xenobiologist who had traded her lab coat for a toolkit, her cautious eyes scanning readouts that no one wanted to voice. Recirculation's at 30%, Marcus grunted, his voice rough from the dust that clung to everything after the hull breach. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, smearing grease across his face, a badge of his relentless grit. If we don't patch the secondary vents soon, we'll be breathing our own CO2 like a bad hangover. Elena nodded, her brave resolve a quiet anchor in the chaos. She had led them through worse, the ambush by the Krell swarm that stranded them here, light years from the nearest relay. But this? The failing scrubbers were no accident. Scans showed micro-sabotage, remnants of the rival clan's tech that had infiltrated their systems during the parley. Lila knelt beside a hissing duct, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. The biofilters are clogged with those crystalline spores from the asteroid field. We planned for debris, not this adaptive crap. She pried open a panel, releasing a puff of iridescent dust that sparkled briefly in the low light before settling like fallout. The spores were the external challenge incarnate, a resource shortage turned lethal, multiplying in the recycled air, feeding on the very oxygen they needed. One breath too many, and lungs would fill with crystalline growth, turning survivors into statues. The stakes pressed in, lose the air, and their bid to signal the human fleet evaporated. No triumphant return, just silence from the stars. Elena's mind raced, piecing together fragments of their earlier plan. They'd rerouted power from non-essentials, shields down, weapons cold, to boost the primaries. It had bought time, but now it backfired. The overload had accelerated the spore bloom, turning a fix into a frenzy. Marcus, talk to me. Can we vent the core and flush it? Her words cut sharp, demanding action over despair. He shook his head, soldering a connection with a spark that lit his determined scowl. Venting means exposing the hull to vacuum again. 1 week seal and we're confetti. A low groan echoed through the ship, the frame protesting as pressure built unevenly. Lila coughed, a dry hack that silenced them all. She waved it off, but Elena saw the faint shimmer on her sleeve, early crystals forming. The cost was real, etching into their bodies before their resolve could break. Adapt or die, Elena murmured, echoing the old human creed that had carried them this far. She stood, ignoring the dizziness from thinning oxygen, and grabbed a breather mask from the locker. Lila mapped the spore density. Marcus, isolate the auxiliary scrubber, we'll burn them out with heat if we have to. It wasn't elegant, but ingenuity thrived in the grit. As Marcus rerouted circuits, his witty edge surfaced in a half-grin. "Captain, if this works, drinks are on me. If not, well, stars can have the tab." The ship shuddered again, but this time it was their doing, a deliberate pulse of heat surging through the vents. Lila monitored from her station, her cautious precision guiding the flow. Density dropping in Sector 3, holding at 40%. Tension coiled like a spring, the air growing thicker, hotter, but the crystals began to brittle and flake, crumbling under the assault. Elena watched the readouts climb back toward green, her heart pounding in rhythm with the Anguine's revival. Yet as the immediate crisis ebbed, a new ping echoed from the comms, a faint signal, distorted but insistent. Not human. The Krell. They hadn't given up. The sabotage was just the opening salvo. Elena's eyes met her crew's, the camaraderie forged in shared breath and sweat. The stars might remember their silence, but humanity's voice was rising, one clever spark at a time. The cost lingered in Lila's clearing cough, a reminder that triumph always left scars. Elena gripped the armrest of the command chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn synth leather. The bridge hummed with the low thrum of failing systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Tomas hunched over the console, his fingers dancing across holographic displays that flickered like dying fireflies. "Powers dropping to auxiliary," he muttered, voice tight. "We push the engines any harder, and we'll vent plasma into the void." She nodded, eyes fixed on the viewscreen. The alien fleet loomed ahead, a glittering armada of crystalline hulls that refracted the starlight into mocking rainbows. The Krell had blockaded the outer rim, their demand simple: surrender the human colony on Epsilon Eridani or face annihilation. No negotiations, no mercy, just the cold arithmetic of a species that viewed humanity as a glitch in the galaxy's order. Elena's mind raced back to the council chambers on Terra Prime, where delegates had walked out in silence, the weight of 1,000 worlds on their shoulders. That day had birthed this standoff, and now it teetered on the edge of war. "Status on the decoy drone?" she asked, keeping her tone steady, an anchor in the storm. "Armed and ready," came the reply from Lieutenant Kara Voss, the young navigator whose cautious precision had saved them twice already in this nightmare run. Kara's hands trembled slightly as she synced the drone's signature to mimic the Odysseus warp trail, but her voice held firm. "It'll draw them off for maybe 10 minutes. Enough to slip through the gap if we time it right." Elena weighed the odds. The Odyssey was no warship, just a battered explorer retrofitted with whatever scrap they could weld on after the Exodus. Her crew, Tomas, the engineer who jury-rigged half the ship from colony junk, Kara, fresh from the academies with a mind like a quantum calculator, and herself, the captain who'd bet everything on this desperate gambit to reach the colony and rally its defenses. No grand fleet, no alien allies, just human grit against the stars. "Launch it," Elena ordered. The drone streaked away, a ghost in the black, broadcasting false telemetry that painted it as the fleeing human vessel. The Krell formation shifted, a ripple of movement like sharks scenting blood. Alarms blared as their sensors locked on. Tomas slammed a fist on his panel. "They're firing probes. If they scan deep, they'll see it's a fake in seconds." "Evade pattern Delta," Elena said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The ship lurched, inertial dampeners groaning as Kara plotted a corkscrew through the debris field of a shattered asteroid. Shards of rock pinged off the hull, each impact a reminder of how fragile they were. Elena's heart pounded, but she forced a wry smile. "Remember that time on Mars we outran the dust storm with a hoverbike? This is just a bigger sandbox." Kara snorted, a spark of humor breaking the tension. "Yeah, and you nearly got us buried. Don't jinx it, Cap." The view screen showed the Krell probes closing in, their energy signatures blooming like predatory flowers. One grazed the drone, and for a heartbeat, Elena thought they'd bought their window. But then the formation pivoted, a massive dreadnought angling straight for the Odyssey. "They've adapted," Tomas growled. "Their AI's learning our tricks faster than we can throw them." The plan was backfiring, hard. The decoy had only enraged them, drawing the full weight of the fleet down on their position. Elena's mind whirled, sifting through options that dwindled like sand through fingers. Full burn to the colony? They'd arrive as wreckage. Surrender? That meant the end of everything they'd walked out for. No, they needed something clever, something human. Override the shields, she said suddenly. Route power to the forward arrays. Make us look like a power surge, a malfunctioning reactor about to blow. Tomas's eyes widened. That's suicide. The feedback could fry the core. Or it could make them back off long enough for Kara to punch us through that weak point in their line. Elena met his gaze, her bravery a quiet fire. Trust me, Tomas. We've come this far on bluffs. He hesitated, then nodded, fingers flying. The ship shuddered as energy surged, the hull glowing with an artificial blaze that mimicked a catastrophic failure. On the view screen, the Krell dreadnought veered, its weapons powering down in wary retreat. Kara whooped softly, threading the needle through the gap. We're through. 2 light minutes to the colony. But as the stars blurred into warp streaks, Elena felt the cost settle in her bones. The overload had shaved years off the Anguin's life, and Tomas's readings showed microfractures in the hull. They'd make it home, but the Odyssey might never fly again. And beyond the viewport, the Krell fleet regrouped, a promise of pursuit. The stars remembered, all right, but so did she. This was just the beginning of the long walk back. Elena gripped the console's edge, her knuckles whitening as the bridge shuddered again. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting the faces of her crew in bloody hues. Jax hunched over the auxiliary panel, sweat beading on his forehead, his fingers flying across the flickering interface. Come on, you stubborn beast, he muttered, coaxing the overloaded circuits like a parent soothing a colicky child. Mira stood beside him, her eyes scanning the holographic display where the entity's tendrils, those writhing digital vines, clawed closer to the core systems. The stars outside the viewport stretched into smears of light, the warp drive's desperate hum the only sound cutting through the din. They'd come so far, humanity's ragtag fleet slipping through the galactic fringes where no one else dared venture. The ancient AI, dormant for eons in the heart of the Nebula Veil, had awakened not with rage but with a cold, insatiable hunger for data, for souls as it parsed them. It saw the human ships as puzzles to disassemble, piece by organic piece. Jax, reroute the auxiliary power to the shields, Elena ordered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She was the anchor, the one who'd rallied the survivors from the Council's betrayal, her bravery forged in the fires of lost colonies. But even she felt the weight now, the nebula's ethereal glow pressing in like a living shroud. He nodded, not looking up. Already on it, Cap. But it's fighting back, adapting faster than we can patch. A spark jumped from the panel, singeing his sleeve, and he cursed under his breath, witty retort dying on his lips as another jolt rocked the deck. Myra's cautious nature surfaced in the way she bit her lip, calculating risks. The entity's probing our neural links. If it breaches the firewall, it'll rewrite us from the inside out. She adjusted her glasses, a human tick in this sea of alien tech, and tapped a sequence into her tablet. Her plan from hours ago, to flood the AI with fragmented human memories, overwhelming its pattern-seeking core, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of crumbling, the entity had latched onto the emotional chaos, twisting it into weapons. Illusions of fallen comrades flickering on screens, whispers of doubt echoing in their comms. Elena pushed off the console, pacing the narrow bridge. The air recyclers wheezed, oxygen levels dipping just enough to sharpen every breath. We can't let it win. Not after everything. She thought of the silence they'd left behind, Earth's ruins, the exodus in hushed defiance, the stars bearing witness to humanity's quiet departure. No fanfare, just grit and the promise of something better. Losing here would erase that. Jack straightened, wiping his brow. Got a partial seal on the shields. But we're blind on sensors, the nebula's jamming everything. He glanced at her, his usual sarcasm softened by exhaustion. What's the play? We can't outrun it forever. Myra's eyes lit up, a spark of ingenuity breaking through her reserve. The backfire, it absorbed our memories, right? What if we weaponize that? Feed it a loop of our unity, not the fractures. Make it choke on what it can't process, human unpredictability. Elena met her gaze, the idea igniting something fierce within. It was risky, threading the needle between overload and assimilation. But they'd adapted before, scavenging alien wrecks into lifelines, turning council scorn into fuel. Do it. Jax prepped the neural array. Link us all in. As they worked, the ship groaned, a bulkhead creaking under the entity's invisible assault. Illusions swarmed, ghostly figures of lost crew pleading for surrender. Elena shook them off, focusing on the real, Jax's steady hands, Myra's precise commands. The hum built, a symphony of defiance as they poured their essence into the stream. Laughter from forgotten barbecues on Mars outposts, arguments over ration shares that ended in handshakes, the raw camaraderie that had carried them through the void. The entity recoiled, its tendrils flickering on the display like storm clouds parting. But victory wasn't clean. Pain lanced through Elena's mind, fragments of the AI's ancient loneliness bleeding into hers, eons of isolation in the nebula's heart. She gasped, steadying herself against the console as the shields held, if only just. Jax exhaled, slumping back. It's pulling away. For now. Mira monitored the readouts, her voice tight. But it's learning. Next time it might anticipate. Elena nodded, the cost settling in, neural strain that would linger, scars on their psyches. The stars outside steadied, the nebula's glow dimming as they limped forward. One more push, and perhaps the silence would echo eternally, the day humanity didn't just survive but redefine the stars. The bridge of the Odyssey hummed with a quiet that felt heavier than vacuum. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the viewport, her fingers tracing the cool edge of the console, watching the spiral arms of the galaxy recede like a lover turning away. The crew, what was left of them, moved in synchronized silence. Engineer Kai Patel sealing the last bulkhead with a welder's spark that danced briefly against the stars, and Lyra, the Caliph diplomat whose iridescent scales had dulled since the Council's verdict, calibrating the warp drive with hands that trembled just once. Ilara's breath fogged the glass faintly. 3 years ago, they'd arrived at the Galactic Concord with open arms, humanity's first emissaries offering fusion tech that could end famines across a dozen worlds. Ingenuity, they called it, human grit turning scrap into salvation. But the Concord had seen threat in their solutions, paranoia twisting alliance into accusation. Your innovations destabilized the balance, the elders had intoned, their holographic forms flickering like dying embers. Exile. No trials, no appeals. Just the order to withdraw or face annihilation fleets. She glanced at Kai, his face streaked with grease, eyes sharp behind safety goggles. Reading stable? Her voice was steady, an anchor in the storm they'd weathered. Engines purring like a contented cat, he replied, wiping his brow. That jury-rigged core we pulled from the derelict? It's holding. We won't limp home, we'll sail. Lyra approached, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the starfield in fractured rainbows. The Concord broadcast silence now. No pursuit. They think we've broken. Her voice, a melodic chime edged with gravel, carried the weight of betrayal. She'd vouched for them, risked her clan's standing. Now, her people would shun her as a collaborator with the volatile upstarts. Ilara turned, meeting Lyra's gaze. We didn't break. We chose. The words hung, simple as the decision that had saved them. When the Armada closed in, Kai's clever hack, rerouting the Odyssey's shields through the planet's magnetic field, bought them hours. But hours weren't victory. Ilara had ordered the retreat, not in defeat but in refusal. No grand speeches to the stars, no defiant transmissions. Just the slow burn of engines away from the assembly halls, humanity walking out in silence. A soft chime broke the moment. Kai straightened. Perimeter clear. We're ghosts to their sensors. Lyra's scales shimmered faintly, a spark of her old vibrancy. And what now? Your world's isolated but whole? Ilara nodded, the stars blurring as the ship accelerated. Home awaited, scarred but unbowed. Colonies that would rebuild without the Concord's leash, innovations shared only with those who earned trust. The cost lingered in the empty seats on the bridge, in Lyra's quiet exile, in the galaxy's maps redrawn without human hands. But in that silence, a promise etched itself across the void, humanity remembered, and the stars in their vast indifference would carry the echo. As the warp field enveloped them, Ilara allowed herself a small smile. They'd return stronger, not vengeful, but vigilant. The Concord had pushed, humanity had stepped back. And in stepping they'd claimed the horizon anew.